जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजन रञ्जन यशोदानन्दन व्रजजन रञ्जन यमुनातीरवनचारी यमुनातीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजन रञ्जन 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 यमुनातीरवनचारी यमुनातीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव राधा माधव राधे जय पंचतत्व 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 जय पंचतत्व जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सदश्री श्रीमद His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada ki ISKCON Beauty Founder Śrīla Prabhupada ki Samveda Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Gaura Premanandi Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकां वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवां साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधकान्ता नमोऽस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौरङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासरि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, The Lord in the Heart, text number 15. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sthiram, sukham, cāsanam, āsthito, yatir. Sthiram sukham cāsanam, āsthito, yatir. Sthiram sukham cāsanam, āsthito, yatir. Yadā, jihāsur, imam, aṅga, lokam. Yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam. Yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam. Kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet. Kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet. kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jita-asuḥ prāṇān niyacchen manasā jihāsur prāṇān niyacchen manasā jihāsur sthiram sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiraṁ sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiram sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiraṁ sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiram sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiraṁ sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiraṁ sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiraṁ sukham cāsanam āsthito yatir yadā jihāsur imam aṅga lokam kāle ca deśe ca mano na sajjayet prāṇān niyacchen manasā jitāsuḥ sthiram without being disturbed sukham comfortable cha also āsanam sitting accommodation āsthitaḥ being situated yatiḥ the sage yadā whenever jihāsuḥ desires to give up imam this aṅga O king lokam this body kāle in time cha and deśe in a proper place cha also manaḥ the mind na not sajjayet may not be perplexed prāṇān, the senses, niyacchen, must control, manasā, by the mind, jita-asuḥ, conquering the life air. Translation purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Translation: O King, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should sit comfortably without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. Please repeat. O King, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 8:14, it is clearly stated that a person who is totally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and who constantly remembers Him at every step easily obtains the mercy of the Lord by entering into His personal contact. Such devotees do not need to seek an opportune moment to leave the present body. But those who are mixed devotees, allied with fruitive action or empirical philosophical speculation, require an opportune moment for quitting this body. For them, the opportune moments are stated in the Bhagavad Gita 8:23-26. But these opportune moments are not as important as one's being a successful yogi who is able to quit his body as he likes. Such a yogi must be competent to control his senses by the mind. The mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the way of merging into the Supreme Absolute. O King, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 15. The chapter is entitled The Lord in the Heart. And this verse is describing how the yogi can quit his body at his own time of choosing. So for some days we've been listening to description of the Virat Rupa and how the materialistic person can meditate upon that form of the Lord and then gradually elevate himself. And in the last few verses we've heard about the beautiful description of the form of the Lord, the personal form of the Lord, and how one should meditate on the different limbs of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yesterday's verse was giving a summary that until a materialist develops a sense of loving service to the Lord, then he should meditate upon the universal form of the Lord. And today, starting a little description of how the yogi can quit his body. So, in this section of Bhagavatam, these next few verses are actually they mirror the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which describes, it's called Attaining the Supreme, which also describes a similar process, how the yogi can withdraw the senses and raise the life airs and then leave his body. And these very powerful yogis, they can even choose the time of departure from this world. And the verses that are referred to here, 8:23-26, Bhagavad Gita, describes how there are certain auspicious times to quit the body and certain inauspicious times. And the other verse quoted here, 8:14, this is not such a famous verse in Bhagavad Gita. It may not make the list of memorization verses, but it's one of my personal favorites, as Prabhupada gives a paraphrasing of the translation. So the verse is, Ananya cheta satatam yomam smarati nityashaha tasyaham sulabhaparta nityayutyasya yoginaha. Giving great stress to fixing the mind upon the form of the Lord. Ananya cheta satatam. So having no other thoughts, one should constantly, yomam smarati nityashaha, he who constantly thinks of me, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, tasyaham sulabhaparta. To such a person, I'm very easy to obtain. Nitya yuktasya yogina, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So 3 times satatam, nitya, twice nitya, once satatam. It's described constant meditation upon the Lord. And if one does that, as Prabhupada says here, one easily obtains the mercy of the Lord by entering into his personal contact. The key word there is sulabha. Sulabha, very simple, it just means easily attained. Labha, like labha, to get something. Or durlabha is to something very rare, something very hard to attain. We're familiar with durlabha manasā janma, by durlabham manusham janma tadapya dhruvam arthadam. Human form of life is considered very rare. But the opposite of that is sulabha, that one can easily attain the mercy of the Lord if one can concentrate one's mind upon Him. And Prabhupada rounds off the purport by stressing that the mind is easily conquered simply by engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord. Gradually, by such service, all the senses become automatically engaged in the service of the Lord. So, sulabha and durlabha are like the two opposites. And there's another nice shloka in Bhagavatam which gives both of these words in the same verse. Nrideham adyam sulabham sudurlabham. Sulabham sudurlabham. Bhavam vikalpam gurukarnadharam mayanukulyaiva nabhasviteritam puman bhavabdim nataret sa atmaha. So it's a very descriptive shloka which is comparing the human form of life to a boat. So to cross the ocean one requires a proper boat. And of course the human form of life, as we know, is very rare. Of the 8,400,000 species, just a small part of that are the civilized human beings who can understand spiritual truth. But if one has the rare human birth, the durlabha human birth, then he can use it to very easily obtain the supreme, sulabha. How? By using the human form, which is compared to the boat, and taking guidance from the captain, Guru Karnadharam. The spiritual master is considered to be the captain. So he guides the disciple across the ocean of birth and death via the boat of the human form of life. And not just the Guru, also the Shastras are very important. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. So the Shastras are the favorable winds which propel the ship across the ocean of birth and death. So having all these facilities, having the human form of life, having come in touch with the bona fide spiritual master, having access to the Shastras, which are encouraging us and giving us guidance how to cross over the ocean of birth and death, and having association of like-minded persons, the last line of the verse points out that one who doesn't take advantage of all these facilities, puman bhavabdi nataret, one who doesn't cross the ocean of birth and death, having all these facilities, sa atmaha, he is considered a killer of his self, like a suicide. Self, atmaha literally means killer of the soul. So having all these facilities, if we do not take advantage of them and simply indulge in the animalistic tendencies, eating, sleeping, mating, defending, and waste the valuable human form of life, then it's considered one is killing the soul. Of course, we know the soul cannot be killed, but figuratively, we're wasting our valuable human form of life. So that's although the human form of life is durlabha, having obtained it, one can easily, by surrendering to the Lord, by concentrating one's mind, one can easily attain the supreme destination. So of course, Maharaj Parikshit, this is just the second chapter, so he's just started to hear these instructions from Shukadeva Goswami. So it's very relevant for him because he has 7 days left to live. And he has to know how he's supposed to quit his body. So Shukadeva Goswami is going to, in the following verses, give some further instructions in that regard. And if we fast forward to the 12th canto, to the very end of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Shukadeva Goswami has completed his instructions and Parikshit Maharaj has approached him and thanked him and said, I'm now fully convinced, I'm now ready for whatever is going to come, whatever is going to happen to me by my karma, by the curse of the Brahmana. Parikshit Maharaj declared himself ready, his mind was fixed. So then he did like this, he sat down and meditated on the Lord, he withdrew his senses, and in that way, when the snake bird, when Takshaka came to bite him, he was not disturbed. he was bitten and his body engulfed into flames by the virulence of the poison. We've all seen the painting. Maharaj Parikshit his body is engulfed in flames, and but he's still sitting there very peacefully, meditating upon the Lord. And Takshaka is there in the foreground, and all the sages around are, alarmed that now Maharaj Parikshit has been is leaving his body. But the description there in the 12th canto is that everyone was a little bit sad, naturally, that Maharaj Parikshit has gone. But then immediately they realize that this soul has gone back to Godhead. So there's no cause for lamentation. Actually, it's a great cause of rejoicing that when a soul can get out of the cycle of birth and death and return back to Godhead, that's a great cause for celebration. So like that, the departure of a great Vaishnava is simultaneously very lamentable and also very celebratory. We can rejoice and celebrate the passing of a Vaishnava from this world. And that's exactly what is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita when Haridas Thakur passed away. Harsha Shoka, mixed feelings of grief and pleasure. The devotees were sad to lose the association of Haridas Thakur, but they were very happy that he has gone back to Godhead. So Haridas Thakur is another personality who we can see how he left his body in such a auspicious situation. He had the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya on his heart. Physically, Lord Chaitanya was in front of him, and all the devotees were doing a uproarious kirtan on all sides, and in full consciousness, just gazing at the lotus face of the Lord, the Lord's feet on his heart. Haridas Thakur gave up his life, also by his own desire. Lord Chaitanya actually wanted him to stay. He was trying to encourage him, and Haridas Thakur was, he was ready to go back to Godhead, and so he left in that way. We know how Lord Chaitanya danced with the body of Haridas Thakur and bathed his body in the ocean of Jagannath Puri, and personally laid him in samadhi. It's a very potent place of pilgrimage. If we go to Puri, you can visit the samadhi of Haridas Thakur near the beach and remember this wonderful pastime. Lord Chaitanya personally begged prasadam and served prasadam at the passing of Haridas Thakur. And of course, the other personality who comes to mind who quit his body by his own desire is Bhishma, which a few chapters ago is described in the first canto, the passing away of Bhishma Dev. So recently we had this Bhishma Panchak observance, and many devotees have misunderstanding that these were the last days of Bhishma. Bhishma Panchak means Bhishma is preparing to leave his body. So that's a bit of a fallacy. That's not actually the case. Bhishma left his body at least this year it's at the end of January on Bhishmashtami. So Bhishma Panchak is another observance, but it's not connected to Bhishma Dev's departure. So it's good if we know our calendar properly and observe the passing of Bhishma Dev at the actual correct time. Because we know like next week is, next Ekadashi is Moksha Ekadashi, and that's Gita Jayanti. So there's actually a nice festival here in Mayapur where many devotees come together. It's going to be on the pandal near the Vamshi. And chant all the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita. So I would encourage all of the devotees to at least attend for some chapters. It's very important. And there's another big pandal out the back. You've seen that apparently there are 5,000 devotees are coming together to chant Bhagavad Gita also there. So anyway, of course, Bhagavad Gita was spoken on the Battle of Kurukshetra, and that was the first day of the battle was Gita Jayanti, when Krishna spoke Gita. Then we know the battle continued for 18 days. On the 10th day, Bhishma fell. He was pierced. His body was riddled with arrows, and he was no longer able to continue fighting, and he lay on the bed of arrows. So Bhishma, he had the benediction from his father that he would only die when he chose to. Otherwise, he was more or less invincible. He couldn't be killed otherwise. So Bhishma, having been incapacitated by the arrows of Arjuna, he lay on the battlefield for the rest of the, till the war was over. And that's like mid-December. And then towards the end of January is actually the time when Bhishma passed away. So it's described that he was waiting for the auspicious time the Uttarayana, when the sun moves into the northern course, then Uttarayana starts. That's on Makar Sankranti. So that's the auspicious time, according to Bhagavad Gita, to leave the body. So Bhishma Dev, he lay in that painful condition for many days. And we also know how, this was also referred to yesterday by Prithivardhan Maharaj, how on that bed of arrows, Bhishma Dev instructed Maharaj Yudhishthira. So in Bhagavatam, it's just a few verses that give a summary of what those instructions were. We know how Yudhishthira Maharaj was very distressed after the battle of Kurukshetra, that so many millions of people had been killed on his account to make him the king, and he was feeling that burden of the pressure that so many people have died, so many families have been torn apart just to crown me. It's all my fault. I'm such a sinner. And he was feeling very, pressured by that and very depressed. So Krishna took Yudhishthira Maharaj. Actually, in Mahabharata, it's a nice description that after a battle when the Pandavas had gone back to Hastinapur, then Yudhishthira Maharaj came to Krishna in the morning, and Krishna was meditating. And Yudhishthira Maharaj couldn't, he was just waiting for Krishna to come out of his meditation. And he asked him, what is your meditation? Who have you been meditating upon? And Krishna said, well, it's my devotee Bhishma. He's thinking of me constantly. Ananyacheta satatam. So I also can't stop thinking about him. So Krishna took Yudhishthira and all the Pandavas back to the battlefield, and they heard from Bhishma Dev. Yudhishthira Maharaj heard instructions of a king, the duties, varnashram duties, and it's described in Mahabharata that actually spent 50 days. Bhishma Dev instructed the Pandavas for 50 days in their duties and how to organize society, because now Yudhishthira Maharaj was going to be king, so he had to rule according to Krishna's desire, according to the Shastras, and Bhishma Dev gave them that instruction, how to rule properly. So at the end of that, then Bhishma Dev, again, just like Haridas Thakur, he was able to leave his body according to his own desire in full union with Krishna. Krishna was right there in front of him. He offered his prayers to the Lord. He was remembering how Krishna was so beautifully decorated as he was driving Arjuna's chariot on the battlefield. That was Bhishma's, he's in the Vira Rasa, in the chivalrous relationship with Krishna. Bhishma was having great ecstasy, fighting Arjuna and seeing Krishna maneuvering Arjuna's chariot as they were fighting together. Of course, Bhishma is on the opposite side, so he's trying to defeat Arjuna. Arjuna is trying to defeat defeat Bhishma. And a couple of times during the battle of Kurukshetra, Bhishma was fighting with so much vigor that, and Arjuna, he had this sentiment that he's my grandfather. How can I kill him? How can I, fight with him? And Arjuna it seems like he was going to be defeated. So two different instances, Krishna actually was enraged by this. He was angry with Arjuna for not fighting fully, and he was angry with Bhishma for, defeating Arjuna. So twice Krishna jumped off the chariot and ran as if to attack Bhishma, and Arjuna had to stop him physically, because Krishna promises, my devotee will not be perished, and will not perish, will not be defeated. So right there, Krishna, although he had promised himself that he would not fight, he was more concerned about his other promise to protect his devotees, that he took up the wheel of a chariot and rushed towards Bhishma as if to kill him. And so in this beautiful state, that's what Bhishma was remembering, that Krishna was coming towards him to kill him, and Bhishma was just welcoming the sight of his Lord in that angry mood, running on the ground, physically running towards him to defeat him. So in this way, Bhishma was remembering the beautiful darshan of Krishna on the battlefield, and he was ready to die then. And then, of course, Arjuna stopped Krishna. But now he had the opportunity to see Krishna face to face and quit his body in that unalloyed, fully absorbed darshan of the Lord. Such an auspicious way to depart. So Bhishma Dev, Haridas Thakur, they had this great opportunity to meditate physically upon the Lord in their final moments. And that is actually the perfection of our Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada would sometimes quote this Bengali saying, bhajan karo, sadhan karo, morte janle hoy. Means whatever bhajan you've done, whatever sadhana you've performed, will be seen at the moment of death. So if we perform our sadhana and our bhajan in a nice manner, we can be confident that we can remember Krishna at the time of death. And recently I came across a verse in the 5th canto, which gives a similar. It gives the same point in the. This is 5:19, 14. I'll just pull it up. 5:19:14. If a person engaged in Krishna consciousness, however, is also afraid of giving up his body, what is the use of his having labored to study the Shastras? It is simply a waste of time. Quite a strong statement from the verse. It's simply a waste of time if we are afraid of death as a devotee, if we performed our sadhana, but we're still fearing death and we're lamenting and scared. That means our sadhana has not been performed with great intensity or absorption. So this is the test, the final moment of our life. What will we recall? What will we remember? And Krishna says very clearly in the same 8th chapter, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavan tyajantyante kalevaram tam tameva iti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. Whatever we remember at the time of death, that state one will attain. Therefore, anta kāle chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati samadbhavam yati nasyatra samshaya. One should therefore, at the end of life, anta kāle, think of Krishna. Then one can attain the supreme destination. Similarly, in the previous chapter of Bhagavatam, just in the 6th verse that was spoken by Shukadeva Goswami, 216, the same point is stressed there, ante narayana smriti. Etavan sankhya yoghabhyam swadharma parinishtaya janmalabha parapamsam ante narayana smriti. So the same ante means at the end. Narayana smriti, to remember the Lord. The highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. So somehow or other, whether it's whatever process we may be following, yena kena prakarena mana Krishna niveshad. We should fix the mind on Krishna in some way or another. There may be different methods of devotional service, different angas of bhakti that we are more attracted to. So we should fix on that and, make that your unshakable sadhana. For some devotees it's Mangalarti, they never miss Mangalarti. Some devotees, they chant their rounds very focused, 16 rounds in one go. Bhagavatam class, never miss. Personally, that's what I try to follow. Some devotees are very strict in their reading, read Prabhupada's books every day. So all of these aspects, are very important. Even if there's just one of those that we never compromise on, and that'll keep us steady in Krishna consciousness, and gradually we can try to increase our devotion in the other aspects that we may not be so fixed or determined in. Just like in the boat example, crossing the ocean in the boat, so there may be so many disturbances, and the boat example is also given in the Bhagavad Gita. Indriyanam hi charatam yan mano nuvidhiyate tadasya harati pragyam vayurnabham ivambasi. So Krishna says in the 2nd chapter that even one of the roaming senses, we have so many senses, there's so many sense objects that the senses are always connecting with, beautiful sights, beautiful smells, beautiful tastes, beautiful sounds. So even one of those senses, that the senses are roaming around in the material world, attaching themselves to different sense objects and getting attracted. And in that way, one's mind can be deviated, just like a boat is pushed here and there by the wind on the ocean. So in the same way, one of the senses may be distracted, but if we have some sadhana that we fix, even one aspect of sadhana that we can fix ourselves upon, we can stay true in our sadhana, stay true to Krishna consciousness, and use that as a foundation to increase our sadhana, increase our devotion, and increase the quality of our practice. The other day, Primanchan Prabhu gave class. He's actually giving the Bengali class right now. And in the previous time he gave class, he mentioned about this devotee, Shyamsundar Jagannath. So I'm not sure if anyone knows him. He was here in Mayapur over the years, part-time. So I also didn't know him very well, but I knew who he was. And he's the devotee who gave class. He was sitting on this asana, gave the Bhagavatam class, and within half an hour, 1 hour, he left his body, just right after giving class. So this is on the 1st of February, 2021. And I wasn't present, but I heard about it, and I went back and listened to his class, and it's just kind of an amazing departure. And actually, Prāṇān Prabhu, who's giving class now, he's the one who gave class the day after. So I asked him, when you came to sit on the Vyasa, what were you thinking? Were you concerned that the person who sat here 24 hours ago, he's no more, he's left this world, and now it's my turn? And he said, no, actually, I wasn't thinking like that. I was just kind of marveling at his good fortune. He said that actually the Prabhu had only come to Mayapur for a few days, and he'd been roped in to give class kind of the last minute. And he sat here, he spoke on Srimad Bhagavatam, shared his realizations, and within 1 hour he went to the hospital, had some pains, and then he just left his body. So like that, it's just an amazing coincidence that, and actually, then I spoke to Padmapad Prabhu, who actually arranges the schedule, and he said that the Prabhu's wife, she thanked him, saying, Prabhu, it's so nice that you arranged my Prabhu to give class that day, because, in that state, he left his body just right after that. So it's, amazing opportunity right here in Mayapur Dham. Because at the moment of death, we don't know, we don't have the control. These yogis, they have some mystic powers, and they can choose the moment of leaving. For us, most of us, probably we won't have that option. It'll be whenever our time comes, our time comes. And that's why King Kulashekar, he actually prayed to the Lord that now I'm young and healthy and physically, mentally strong. This is the best time actually to leave the body. It's actually a revolutionary thought that most people want to prolong their life as long as possible, stretch out every moment. And Prabhupada sometimes would say how he personally knew some very rich man who was begging the doctor, I still have more things to do, give me a few more days, please prolong my life on the deathbed, begging the doctor to somehow do something to increase the lifespan. But Maharaj Kulakshekar, his prayer was, Krishna tudaya patabanga japanjarantam adyaiva vishatume manasa rajahamsa. Adya means today. Prāṇān prāṇa prayana samaye kafavat pitto kantavarodhana vido smaranam kutaste. Srila Prabhupada chants this verse very beautifully with so much feeling. And so King Kulashekar is one of the alvars. He's praying that may my mind be immersed in the lotus of your feet, O Lord. And basically he's praying to let me give up my body right now. He was a young king, powerful. Otherwise, when at the moment of death in old age, when the throat is choked up and the body is undergoing so many distressful conditions, how will it be possible to remember you? So King Kulashekar is praying like that. Let me quit my body now when I'm young and able to focus, and the body is not distressed, because it can be very difficult to remember Krishna at that time. Of course, this point of leaving the body at an auspicious time, this is especially for the yogis, and for the devotees it's not so important. And Prabhupada actually expands on that in his purports to the relevant verses in the 8th chapter, that for a devotee, it doesn't matter if it's Uttarayana or Dakshinayana or this or that. If one is able to think of Krishna, it doesn't really matter. There's no such thing as a devotee should only pass away in the Uttarayana. Bhishma, he had the power to die whenever he wanted, so he decided, let me pass away at the auspicious time. But of course, the real auspiciousness of Bhishma's passing wasn't that it was Uttarayana, it was that he was face to face with Krishna. So that's why we see when devotees pass away, we're very lucky to live in association that the devotees will help us remember. So a few years back, we happened to be in Vrindavan when Gunagrahi Maharaj was leaving his body. And it was a very intense atmosphere, and there were many senior devotees and very strong kirtan, and Govinda Maharaj was like yelling Mahamantra in his ear, and Maharaj was, you could see he was very close to leaving his body. His body was finished. And many devotees had gathered there to support him and encourage him to go back to Godhead. It was a very extraordinary experience. Unfortunately, there are also some devotees who are a little bit not in the right mood, and they're taking selfies and posting, photos of themselves there. It wasn't actually very conducive, but luckily Maharaj was kind of further back. He wasn't able to, I presume he wasn't able to see all that. He was just surrounded by devotees who were really absorbed and encouraging him to let go of the body and to go back to Krishna, go back to Prabhupada's service. So in that way we can be hopeful that if we stay in the association devotees will help us to remember Krishna, no matter how physically incapacitated we may be. I had a few other points to make, but since time is almost up, maybe we could end here unless there are some questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for this enlightened class. I was thinking that now we have this human form of life, and I got the mantra, I'm in the movement, in the right association, but the senses are always strong, the allurements are there, disturbances are there, threefold, fourfold. So what gives the soul the determination to keep going no matter what happens? Is it the sincerity of one's desire or the purity of practice?
Well, we're all here. We're all dealing with these kind of issues, as you mentioned, every day. Mind wanders here and there. We have to bring it back. We have to have some solid sadhana that we practice every day that keeps us on track. I think for many devotees, reading Prabhupada's books every day is like a lifeline that keeps them connected. And it's, Prabhupada, how much stress he gave to that. There was a very powerful quote the other day from the education ministry, and I looked it up, and it was, if you don't read the books of the spiritual master is writing books, and if the disciple doesn't take advantage of that, that is guru ravagya. That is disobeying the instruction of the spiritual master. It's quite a heavy instruction. We don't normally think of that. Normally it's like, okay, it's a luxury to read Prabhupada's books, so we do it occasionally, or by the way, perhaps, or not at all sometimes. But actually, Prabhupada said it's an offense to the spiritual master to not read books. He labored so hard, getting up at 1 a.m. in his old age to translate the books, sacrificing his sleep. Not just for distribution, but for us to read, to immerse ourselves, to engage the mind in the Shastra, in the study, and to purify ourselves. So I think for many devotees, if you're able to read every day, at least a minimum amount, that's like a lifeline that will keep us connected to Krishna, keep our consciousness away from the sense objects. So that would be one answer I would give. Highly recommended to do that. Otherwise we're here in the association devotees, we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're hearing Bhagavatam. These are all the recommended processes to keep oneself steady on the path of devotional service. And if we can do those things with quality, then gradually our tastes for material objects will diminish more and more. And then, as Prabhupada says here, it's very easy. If the mind is attracted to the lotus feet of the Lord, then automatically the senses will be engaged, and we have no interest in material distractions. And that will keep us in very good stead when the moment comes to leave this body. If we're attached to Krishna more than anything, then we will be able to remember him. And of course the devotees will be there to remind us, if we're fortunate and if we stay in that association.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
little bit more on her question. I thought that was a pretty relevant question to a lot of us. I think. And it seems that is that just the mind that tells us that there's still some hope? You know, like that maybe we can get somewhere where we can just take a little vacation from Hare Krishna and still enjoy somehow in the material world, and then maybe we can come back to being a devotee when we're done. When is it ever done?
Well, nishtha is like firm faith. Asakti means you're attached to Krishna. So as you progress through those levels, then one's attraction to Krishna increases and one's attraction to material sense objects decreases. Of course, we know that Maharaj Bharat, all the way, who was on the level of bhav, he got distracted by the deer, by becoming attached to the deer. So, in one sense he fell down, but we can look at it in another way, that he did think of the deer at the time of death instead of Krishna, and therefore he took the body of a deer. But because he had practiced devotional service so much, he was able to remember his previous life, and he was able to make sure that he didn't repeat the same mistakes. So when he was in the body of a deer, he just stayed near the ashram of the sages so he could associate and hear the prayers and the mantras and be in that spiritual association. And then when he took his next birth as Jada Bharat, he pretended to be deaf and dumb and withdrew. He didn't want to engage his senses in the material energy, so he just pretended to be like a mute, a dumb person. But actually he was very elevated transcendentally. So there's also described that Maharaj Bharat's, maybe his problem was that he wasn't in association, he was alone. If he'd been with his god brothers, say, with other sages even, they would have said, hey, what is this? Why are you getting so distracted by this deer? And they could have pulled him back. So that way, if we stay in the association of devotees, we have close relationships that devotees who can remind us or pull us back if we start to deviate. That's a very valuable way to keep ourselves on the razor's edge. It's a straight and narrow path of devotional service. Not be distracted by this or by that. Stay in the association of devotees that can keep us steady, keep us fixed. If we start to deviate, they'll remind us and pull us back. And then, many years, many decades of performing devotional service, we have to hope that we increase our quality, and that way we'll not be distracted so much. And even if we are distracted, we have to pull ourselves back. If the mind wanders off, yato yanto nischalaji manas chanchalam sthiraṁ, we have to bring it back under the control of the self. So it can be a constant struggle. But the more one engages in Krishna consciousness, more one immerses one's mind at the lotus feet of the Lord, hears about his pastimes and his wonderful qualities, then naturally the attraction to material objects will decrease. But that's just the process of devotional service as given to us by Srila Prabhupada and also mentioned in this verse. If we can understand that Krishna is the most attractive, then the other attractive features of this world will not deviate our minds from his lotus feet.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. Thank you so much. It's very inspiring, especially that the shloka which you quoted from Mukundamala Stotra of Kuleshekar Alvar. So there, it's our effort. Like if our effort is required. That he says that at the time of death, so that I will die now. In Varaha Purana, Krishna says, "Edi vadanti doshena mad bhakto mam na cha smaret aham smarami mad bhakta nayami param gadim." So he will remember his devotee. So which one is easier? And to get this quality, what we should do, or what should we be striving for? What? Either that or this.
Yeah, that's a very nice verse. Thank you for quoting it. I actually had it in the back of my mind. This, you have the full translation?
if my devotee is unable to remember me at the time of death because of disturbances felt within the body at that time, then I shall remember my devotee and take him back to my supreme abode.
Yeah, very nice. And it complements this. We try to remember the Lord, and if He's pleased with us, He'll remember us. So that's in that case, both bases are covered. Because it's true, there may be some sudden accident, and just in a moment one passes away. But Krishna will remember us. And if it's not just the moment of death, but it's the quality of life, the quality of service one has performed throughout one's life, how much dedication we've had, that Krishna will remember us. What's that? The Upanishad, the Ishopanishad, the last verse, I think, right? It's may the Lord remember all that I have done for you. Krato yad smarata or something, I can't remember it right now. So yeah, that's like the verse you quoted is like rounds off this topic, that even if we're not able to remember Krishna at the time of death, if He's pleased upon us, He's pleased with our service, our dedication, our whatever we've done for Him, then He may remember us, and in that way we can get the same benefit, same result. Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Premanandi.